The girl had no memory of a sky. For her, the world had always been made of stone, dust, and darkness. The mind swallowed light like a hungry beast, and every day felt the same. Wake up to the sound of chains clashing, work until her hands bled, and sleep on the cold ground with hunger chewing her insides. Her body was thin, her skin scarred, and her eyes hollow. She had been a mind slave for as long as she could remember, and no one had ever called her by a name. She was just another tool, another broken creature meant to dig and suffer. The air was thick with smoke and metallic dust. Breathing was pain. The ground trembled whenever new tunnels were carved, and sometimes the roof cracked, sending rocks falling on slaves. If someone was crushed, no one came to help. The guards only laughed, their heavy boots stepping over broken bodies as if they were nothing. The girl had seen children born in the dark and die before they ever walked outside. She had seen mothers cry without tears because water was too rare even for crying. The overseers shouted in harsh voices, swinging whips that tore into flesh. She had long stopped screaming when pain came. Screams wasted strength, and strength was the only thing keeping her alive. Every corner of the mine carried whispers of fear. Slaves spoke in low voices, afraid of being heard. Hope was forbidden, and dreams were dangerous. The girl had tried to forget her own dreams. Long ago, she used to imagine a warm light, open air, maybe a family waiting for her somewhere. But years of beatings and hunger killed those thoughts. Now she was only a shadow moving in the dark, her back bent, her hands hard like stone from endless work. One evening, the overseers forced the slaves deeper into the tunnels. The air grew thinner, heavy with poison gas leaking from cracks. A young boy collapsed beside her, coughing blood. She wanted to help him, but the guard's whip snapped across her shoulders, forcing her forward. She kept walking, the boy's weak cries echoing behind her until they faded away. She did not turn back. She had learned the rules of survival. Never stop, never care. Caring brought punishment, and punishment meant death. The food they received was rotten paste, thrown in metal bowls once a day. The water was dirty, tasting like rust. Sometimes, when the girl lay on the cold ground at night, she pressed her hand against her chest, feeling her heartbeat, wondering how long it would last. The mind took everything: childhood, laughter, even the sense of being alive. Around her, faces were pale, lips cracked, eyes filled with quiet despair. No one looked at each other for long. To look too much was to remember that you were not alone, and remembering made the pain sharper. But even in her broken state, the girl noticed small things. The chains rattling on her wrists had grown thinner from years of wear. The overseer, who usually guarded her section, limped from an old wound. And deep in the tunnels, far from the guard's eyes, some slaves scratched marks on the walls, lines counting days, symbols of forgotten worlds. She sometimes touched those marks, though she didn't know what they meant. It felt like touching someone else's voice, someone who had wanted more than this pit of suffering. The noise of pickaxes against stone was endless. Sparks flew when metal struck rock, and the sound echoed like thunder. Sometimes, the girl imagined the mine was alive, listening to every breath, waiting to swallow her whole. When she closed her eyes, she could hear whispers in the dark. Not voices of people, but the memory of pain left behind by thousands who had died here. She often wondered if her soul would be trapped in these walls forever when her body failed. One day, while she was working near the lowest tunnel, a tremor shook the ground. Dust rained down, and the slaves screamed. A tunnel wall split open, revealing a hidden cavern glowing faintly with strange crystals. The overseers shouted in excitement, pushing everyone forward to dig faster. The girl's hands bled as she struck the crystal with her tool. The shard broke with a sharp sound, and light spilled out for a moment, warm and golden, unlike anything she had seen before. Her heart raced. It was small, but it was real light, not the dead glow of lamps. She wanted to hold it, but the guard slapped it out of her hands. The crystal shattered on the ground, and the light faded. Her chest ached as if something precious had been stolen. That night, she could not sleep. The image of that golden light burned inside her mind. For the first time in years, she wanted something. She wanted to see more of it, to feel it again. A dangerous thought crept into her heart, the thought that maybe, just maybe, there was still a world beyond these tunnels. She tried to crush the idea, reminding herself that hope was poison. But hope, once lit, refused to die. Her body trembled with fear as she realized the truth. She was not fully broken. Somewhere deep inside, a tiny spark of life remained. And though she did not know it yet, that spark would soon meet another fire, one carried by a stranger who did not belong in the mines, a stranger who would change her life forever. The next morning, the slaves were pushed into the tunnels again. Their chains clattered as they walked, their faces down, their shoulders heavy. The girl dragged her feet like the others, already tired before the day began. But then, something unusual happened. Among the crowd of beaten bodies, a new figure appeared. It was a man, but not like the slaves she knew. He was human. His clothes were not torn rags, his body not starved. He walked differently, straight, strong, without fear in his eyes. The overseer shoved him forward, but he did not stumble. He looked around calmly, studying the tunnels, the guards, the slaves. The girl froze when his gaze swept over her. His eyes were sharp, but not cruel. For a moment she forgot to breathe. No one had ever looked at her that way. Not like a broken tool, not like an insect. It was as if he saw her as someone. The guards ordered him to work. They gave him a pickaxe, expecting him to bend and obey like everyone else. But the human did not rush. He touched the stone wall with his hand, as if testing its strength. Then, with one powerful swing, he broke off a large piece of rock. The sound echoed loudly, startling even the overseers. The girl's eyes widened. No slave she had ever seen could strike stone like that. Most barely had the strength to lift their tools. The other slaves whispered among themselves, their voices shaking with fear and curiosity. Who was this man? Why was he here? No human had ever been sent to this mine before. The overseers did not explain, and the slaves did not dare ask. But in the girl's heart, a restless feeling grew. Something was different about him. Something dangerous. Something hopeful. Hours passed, and the human kept working. He did not groan, did not cough, did not slow down. His skin was covered in dust, but his eyes stayed bright. When the guards shouted at him, he did not flinch. When they whipped another slave, his jaw tightened, but he said nothing. His silence was not like theirs, born of fear. It was a silence that felt heavy, controlled, like a storm waiting behind clouds. The girl found herself stealing glances at him. Every time his pickaxe struck, sparks flew brighter than usual. Every time he lifted a rock, she felt a strange pride, as if his strength belonged to all of them. But with that pride came fear. The guards would not let this continue. If he stood out too much, they would punish him, and maybe all of them. At the food line, she saw him again. The overseers threw bowls of rotten paste on the ground, as always. Slaves scrambled like starving animals, fighting for a little extra. The human did not fight. He calmly picked up a bowl and sat on the ground. He did not eat quickly like the rest, afraid someone might steal from him. He ate slowly, his eyes watching everything, as if he was measuring the mine itself. The girl sat across from him, pretending not to look, but when his gaze met hers again, her heart jumped. She turned away quickly, ashamed of the weakness in her chest. That night, when the slaves were chained to their corners, she listened. Usually, the only sounds were coughing, moaning, or the clatter of chains. But this night was different. She heard the human humming, a low sound, soft, strange in the dark. She did not know the song, but it carried warmth. Some of the slaves stirred, confused. One child whispered to her mother, asking what the sound was. The mother did not answer. She was afraid. But the girl closed her eyes and listened. For the first time, the mind did not feel completely dead. Days passed, and the human remained. He worked like the others, yet unlike them. He did not bend in spirit. When the overseer struck him once for pausing too long, he did not cry out. He only stared back at them with eyes so cold that the guard stepped back, unsettled. The girl saw it and felt her chest tighten. No one had ever looked at the guards like that and survived. He was different. He was dangerous. Still, no one knew his purpose. Was he truly a slave, sent here to break like the rest? Or was he something else? Rumors spread among the slaves. Some whispered he was a spy, testing them for rebellion. Others said he was insane, a fool who did not understand the hopelessness of this place. But the girl could not believe either. Deep inside, she felt there was more. His eyes held secrets, and secrets in a place like this meant change. One day, when the tunnel lights flickered and darkness filled the cavern for a moment, the girl felt a rough hand push her aside. She stumbled, thinking it was a guard. But when the light returned, She saw it was the human. A large rock had broken loose from above, crashing exactly where she had been standing. If he had not pushed her, she would have been crushed. She looked at him in shock. He only nodded once, then returned to his work, as if saving her life was nothing. Her heart raced. No one helped each other here. Slaves let others die because survival demanded it. Yet this man, this stranger, had saved her without a word. She wanted to thank him, but her throat locked. She had forgotten how to speak without fear. She only stared at his back as he lifted his pickaxe again. That night she lay awake, staring at the ceiling of the mine. Her body ached, her stomach twisted with hunger, but her mind was restless. The human was not like them. He had strength, courage, and something else she could not name. For the first time in years, she wondered if maybe her life could be more than chains and dust. And yet, fear gripped her heart too. If the overseers discovered that this man was different, they would kill him. They would kill anyone who stood near him. Still, she could not stop thinking about him. The strange human who walked straight when everyone else crawled. The man who looked at her as if she was alive. The storm behind his silence frightened her, but it also lit something inside her, a tiny spark, fragile but impossible to ignore. The tunnels shook as workers struck the stone again and again. Dust filled the air, covering their faces until everyone looked the same, gray and lifeless. The girl's arms burned with pain, but she kept moving her pickaxe. If she slowed, the whip would cut her back. The guards shouted, their voices echoing like thunder. Her eyes stung from the dust, and her breath came in shallow gasps. Then the ground trembled harder. A crack split open in the wall. Rocks tumbled down. Slaves screamed and scattered, but she was too slow. A heavy stone rolled and struck her leg. She fell forward, her pickaxe clattering out of reach. Pain shot through her body. She tried to crawl, but her leg was pinned. Her heart pounded in terror as she heard the guard's footsteps rushing closer. The overseer's shadow fell over her. Instead of helping, he raised his whip. The leather lashed across her back once, then again, sharp and merciless. "Get up!" he roared. "Move, animal!" She cried out, but could not lift herself. The other slaves turned their faces away. No one dared to look. No one dared to care. Helping meant punishment, and punishment meant death. Her chest heaved, dust filling her lungs. She thought this was the end, that the whip would beat her until her body gave out, and then they would leave her to rot under the stones. The guard's hand lifted again, but suddenly another figure stepped into the light. The human. He did not shout. He did not hesitate. He grabbed the stone pinning her leg and heaved it aside. Muscles strained, veins stood out on his arms, and with one push, the rock rolled away. The girl gasped, half in pain, half in disbelief. Before she could move, the human knelt and pulled her up, supporting her weight with his shoulder. The guard snapped his whip at him. The crack split the air, but the human caught the leather in his bare hand. For a heartbeat, silence filled the tunnel. The guard froze, shocked that someone had dared to stop him. The human's eyes burned like fire in the dark. He let the whip drop and simply said, "She can't walk. You will kill her like this." The overseer's face twisted with rage. He raised his hand again, but then stopped. Something in the human's stare made him hesitate. No slave had ever looked at him like that. It was not fear. It was not weakness. It was defiance. The overseer spat on the ground, shouted a curse, and stormed away. The other guards laughed nervously, but did not stop the human. The girl leaned against him, trembling. Her leg throbbed with pain, but what shook her more was what he had done. No one ever stood against the guards. No one ever touched the whip without being beaten to death. Yet here he was, calm, fearless, and still holding her up as if she mattered. He guided her to a corner of the tunnel, away from falling rocks. Then he reached into his shirt and pulled out a small flask, water. Real water. He held it to her lips. At first she pulled back, confused. Slaves never shared water. Water was life, and life was too rare. But his eyes told her to drink. Slowly, she opened her mouth. The cool liquid slid down her throat, and she almost cried. It was the sweetest taste she had ever known. Her hands shook as she whispered, "Why?" Her voice was hoarse, unused to kindness. The human looked at her, his face unreadable. "Because you're alive," he said simply. The words echoed in her mind. "Because you're alive." No one had ever spoken to her like that. In the mines, she had been treated as less than an animal, a tool, a shadow. But he spoke as if her existence mattered, as if she was more than chains and scars. The moment passed quickly. He stood and went back to work as if nothing had happened. The girl sat in silence, her heart racing faster than the pain in her leg. Around her, other slaves pretended not to see, but their eyes betrayed them. Some were wide with fear, others with curiosity. A few even carried a spark of something long buried, hope. As the hours dragged on, she returned to her labor, limping, but not broken. Every time she glanced at the human, she felt that strange warmth again. He swung his pickaxe with steady power, his body moving like a machine, yet his eyes always alert, always watching. Not like a slave, but like someone planning something. That night, when the slaves were chained in their corners, she lay awake replaying the moment. His hand catching the whip, his strength lifting the stone, his voice saying she was alive. The words refused to fade. They wrapped around her heart, stirring emotions she had buried long ago. For the first time in years, she felt something other than fear or despair. She felt the tiniest spark of trust. It was fragile, frightening even, but it was there. She wanted to believe in it. She wanted to believe in him. Her mind argued with itself. Trust was dangerous. Hope was poison. The mines had taught her those lessons well. Yet her body still remembered his hand pulling her up, his water easing her throat. She could not erase the memory no matter how hard she tried. As sleep finally pulled her into darkness, one thought remained clear, beating louder than the ache of her wounds. This human was not like anyone she had ever known. He was different. And because of him, something inside her had shifted. Something small but unstoppable had begun to awaken. The mind was never silent, but in the deepest tunnels the noise softened into whispers. Chains rattled far away, picks struck stone in slow rhythm, and the guards' voices echoed faintly. In that half-darkness, the human moved closer to the girl. She was still sore from her injured leg, working slower than the others. The guards did not notice him slip beside her. His voice was low, almost a breath. "Do you want to stay here forever?" The girl froze. No one asked such things. The walls had ears, the guards had whips. She shook her head quickly, trying to silence him before someone heard. But his eyes did not leave hers. Calm, sharp, unafraid. She whispered back, "Be quiet, they will hear." "They don't hear everything," he said. His tone carried certainty, like he had walked in darker places before. "Listen to me. I am not here to break rocks. I am here to break chains." Her heart thudded painfully. She stared at him, unsure if he was mad. Every slave had once dreamed of escape, but those dreams always ended in blood. She had seen the bodies dragged out, left as warnings. No one survived outside. And yet his voice lit something inside her chest, a flame she thought had died. "You will die if you say such things," she muttered. He leaned closer, his words careful. "Maybe, but I would rather die fighting than live buried in stone." His gaze shifted around them. The guards were distracted by a group further away. He looked back at her. "I need someone who knows these tunnels. You have been here longer than me. You've seen every path." She shook her head violently, fear squeezing her lungs. "No, no one escapes. The mines swallow everyone. If we run, they will hunt us. They always hunt us." The human's lips curved slightly, not quite a smile, more a challenge. "Then let them hunt. We won't be easy prey." He pressed a small stone into her palm. It was smooth, marked with lines scratched by hand. She realized they were not random. They formed shapes, directions. A map. Her breath caught. He had been studying, memorizing paths when no one noticed. She closed her fist around the stone, panic rising. If the guards found it, she would be executed. She hissed, "Are you mad? If they see this—" "They won't," he said firmly. "Not if you hide it. Not if you help me." His voice softened. "I saw you look at the light in the crystal. You haven't given up, not fully. I can see it in your eyes." Her throat tightened. She wanted to deny it, to claim she was nothing but a shadow like the rest. But his words struck too deep. She remembered that golden glow, how it had made her chest ache. She remembered his hand pulling her from the rocks, his water saving her. She whispered, "I am afraid." "So am I," he admitted. "Fear is not weakness. Fear keeps us alive, but it should not chain us." The overseer's voice cracked like a whip in the distance. Both of them bent quickly, pretending to strike stone again. The girl's hands trembled as she worked. Her mind raced. Escape? Freedom? These words tasted forbidden, dangerous, yet sweet. Later, when the slaves were herded back to their corner of the cavern, the human sat beside her again. The guards thought nothing of it. To them, slaves were invisible unless they disobeyed. In the shadows, he whispered more. He spoke of hidden cracks in the mine walls that led to unused shafts. He had counted the guard rotations. He knew when the overseers changed shifts and which tunnels stayed unguarded for moments at a time. He had noticed weapons left unattended, tools that could be turned sharp. Every detail made her heart pound faster. She had lived in the mines her whole life, but she had never seen it as he did. To her, it was a prison too vast to escape. To him, it was a puzzle with pieces waiting to be shifted. "Why tell me?" she asked. Her voice was barely air. "Why not tell them?" She nodded toward the other slaves, huddled in silence. "Because they are broken," he answered without cruelty. "Maybe they can be mended later. But you still have fire. I need that." She turned away, biting her lip. His words frightened her more than the guards. Fire? She felt like ash. Yet deep inside, something glowed faintly, like embers under cold dust. That night, sleep did not come. She lay staring at the darkness, her fingers tracing the lines on the small stone he had given her. A map, a plan, a chance. Every sound around her seemed louder. The shuffle of guards, the cough of dying slaves, the clink of chains. She imagined running, imagined breathing free air. The thought hurt as much as it thrilled her. The next day, he worked beside her again. He whispered more of his plan in pieces, never enough for anyone listening to understand. Small hints, scattered words. The third tunnel slopes upward. The air smells fresher there. The guard with the limp always dozes. His keys hang loose. The storage pit holds old rope. We could use it. She listened, her fear mixing with awe. He saw opportunity where she had only seen walls. And slowly, against her will, she began to imagine it too. One evening, when a guard struck a boy for collapsing, the human's hand tightened on his tool. Rage burned in his eyes. The girl grabbed his wrist, whispering, "Not now, not yet." He looked at her, then released his grip. For the first time, she felt not only fear but responsibility. She was part of this now. When the slaves were sent back to their chains, the girl's heart would not slow. His words echoed in her ears, louder than the guards' shouts. Not here to break rocks, here to break chains. For years, she had buried every dream, every spark. But now the fire was stirring, fed by his voice, his eyes, his impossible courage. And she knew, no matter how hard she tried to silence it, she would never be able to return to the empty silence of before. Something had begun, and there was no turning back. The night of the attempt came with heavy silence. The air in the tunnels was colder than usual, and the slaves lay chained in their corners, pretending to sleep. The girl's heart hammered in her chest so loudly, she thought the guards would hear it. Her fingers curled around the small stone map the human had scratched for her. Every line of it was burned into her memory now. The human moved first. He shifted his chains carefully until the old lock clicked open with the piece of metal he had hidden inside his clothes. The sound was faint, lost under the snores of a guard nearby. He crouched low, his eyes sharp in the dim light, then reached for her. She hesitated, fear clawing her throat, but when he unlocked her chains, she followed. Her legs trembled, still weak from years of wounds and hunger, yet they carried her forward because she could not ignore him. Together they moved along the shadows of the cavern wall. Around them, other slaves stirred in their sleep, but did not wake. The guards were few tonight. One sat near the entrance, head drooping, drunk on stolen liquor. Another paced lazily with a lantern, yawning every few steps. The human had chosen well. They slipped into the lower tunnel, the one where the walls sweated with dampness. Every drip of water echoed like a drumbeat, making the girl's heart skip. The human's hand pressed against her shoulder when she almost stumbled. He pointed upward, toward a narrow shaft that slanted away from the main path. They climbed, the stones scraping their skin. Her breath came in harsh gasps, but his steady strength pulled her onward. The tunnel grew tighter. The girl's body shook with panic. She had lived her life underground, yet never felt the walls so close. Her chest tightened, and she whispered, "I cannot." The human turned, his face inches from hers, and whispered back, "Yes, you can. One step more. Don't think of the stone. Think of the air waiting outside." His voice was not commanding, but steady, like a rope pulling her out of drowning water. She bit her lip and kept going. They reached a fork where the darkness split into two paths. The girl froze, unsure which way. Her memory blurred. She had seen this place before, but only as a child. The human crouched, touching the floor, feeling the faint breeze. He pointed left. Fresh air, he muttered. She followed, her trust now heavier than her fear. The silence broke suddenly with a shout behind them. A guard's lantern flickered in the distance. The overseers had noticed their absence. Chains rattled as alarms spread. The girl's blood turned to ice. The human grabbed her hand and pulled. They ran, stumbling, breathless, the walls echoing with angry cries. They reached a wide chamber filled with piles of broken tools and rotting rope. The human seized one coil of rope and tied it fast around a stone pillar. He threw the rest down a steep drop where a tunnel had collapsed. "Climb," he ordered. The girl stared at the dark hole, fear choking her. "I will fall." "You won't," he said. His eyes blazed with certainty. "I'll be right behind you." She grasped the rope with shaking hands. Her feet slipped on the loose stones, but she climbed, her muscles screaming. Above her, faint air drifted through cracks, cold, clean, not poisoned with dust. Hope filled her lungs more than breath. She pulled harder, faster. Behind her, the human climbed too, his weight steadying the rope. A shout rang closer. A guard had found them. His blade clanged against the rock as he chased. The human growled, "Climb faster!" The girl gasped and pulled herself up through the narrow crack at the top. She tumbled onto damp ground, coughing. She turned just as the human swung his fist below, striking the guard's jaw. The man stumbled backward into the pit, screaming as he vanished into the dark. The human hauled himself up, breathing hard, sweat and dust covering his face. He grabbed the rope and cut it with a sharp rock so no one else could follow. Then he turned to her, his chest rising and falling, but his eyes steady. "We're not done yet. Keep moving." They ran through the broken shaft. Each step felt like stolen time. Their lungs burned, their feet slipped on jagged stone, but they kept going. The tunnel rose higher, and with it came the sound she had never heard before. Wind, faint, whistling through cracks. She stumbled in awe. The human urged her on. "That's freedom. Don't stop now." The final stretch was brutal. The passage narrowed so tightly they had to crawl on their stomachs. Rocks tore their skin. Dust choked their throats. The girl wanted to stop, to lie down and vanish into the earth. But behind her, she heard the human's low voice. "Move. You're almost there." His hand pressed her back gently, pushing her forward. And then she saw it. A sliver of silver light cutting through the black. Moonlight. She froze, tears burning her eyes. She had never seen the sky, never seen anything beyond stone. Now it was right there, waiting. She dragged herself toward it, clawing at the earth until her hands broke through. Cold night air rushed against her skin. She gasped like someone breathing for the first time. The human pulled her out of the hole, and together they collapsed on the ground outside. The stars stretched above them, endless and glittering. The girl stared, her mouth open, her chest rising in sobs she did not understand. It was too big, too beautiful. She pressed her hands to her face, afraid it was a dream. The human sat beside her, his own breath ragged but his gaze fixed on the horizon. He looked at her then, his voice steady. "You're free now, but freedom has a price. They'll come for us." She swallowed, still staring at the stars. Fear clung to her, but it was different now. Not the fear of chains, but the fear of losing something precious she had just found. She whispered, "Then I will run. I will fight. I will not go back." The human nodded once, his expression hard but proud. The mines were behind them, but the danger was only beginning. For the first time, the girl felt both terror and strength in the same heartbeat. She had escaped the darkness, and now, with the human at her side, she would face whatever waited beyond the stars. The night air wrapped around her like a new world, cold, sharp, alive. She lay on the grass, her chest rising and falling as if she had never truly breathed before. Above her, the sky stretched wide, filled with stars that seemed endless. Her eyes stung with tears. She had imagined light many times, but this was beyond imagination. She whispered to herself, "It is real." The human stood near her, scanning the dark forest around them. His body was tense, every sense alert. He was not staring at the stars like she was. He was listening for danger. She watched him in silence, noticing how different he looked under the moonlight. Strong, scarred, but not broken. He belonged in this open world, while she still felt like a shadow dragged out of the mines. Her body shook. Fear still clung to her bones. She whispered, "They will find us." Her voice trembled. He turned to her and crouched close. "Yes," he said quietly, "they will try, But we will keep moving. We are faster in the dark. And now you are not their slave anymore. You choose where to go. The words stunned her. She had never chosen anything in her life. The idea of choice felt heavier than chains. She lowered her eyes, confused. He reached out and placed a hand on her shoulder. His touch was steady, warm. Fear will not kill you, he said. Giving up will. They began walking through the forest. Each step was awkward for her. The ground was soft, uneven. Roots and grass tangled around her feet. The mine had been flat, stone and dirt only. Here, the earth was alive, and it frightened her. But the human slowed his pace, letting her find balance. He guided her through the shadows of trees, pointing out where to step, where to duck. The sounds of night surrounded them, chirps, rustling leaves, distant cries of animals. At first, she flinched at every noise, but slowly she realized none of them carried whips. None shouted in anger. The forest was wild, but it was not cruel. They stopped near a stream. Water glimmered under the moon. She knelt beside it, staring at her reflection. For the first time, she saw her own face clearly. Pale, hollow, scarred, but alive. She touched the water and felt it cool against her skin. She cupped her hands and drank, and it tasted cleaner than anything she had ever known. Her eyes closed as relief washed through her. She whispered, "I did not know water could taste like this." The human filled a small flask and handed it to her. "Keep this with you. Always drink when you can." She nodded, clutching it tightly as if it were treasure. As dawn crept over the horizon, they found a fallen tree and rested under its shelter. The girl's body ached from running, but her mind was restless. She could not sleep. She turned to him and asked, "Why do you help me?" The question had burned inside her since the tunnels. He looked at her calmly. "Because you remind me of what is worth saving." She did not understand. Her voice broke. "I am nothing. I was a slave all my life. I do not even have a name." He studied her face for a long moment. Then he said softly, "Then choose one now. The past does not decide who you are. You do." Her breath caught. A name? To choose one? The thought felt impossible. She turned away, hugging her knees. But a seed had been planted. For the first time, she imagined herself as someone more than a tool in the dark. They kept moving, deeper into the forest, further from the mines. The days were hard. Hunger gnawed at them. They ate roots, berries, whatever the human found safe. He showed her how to light a fire with stones, how to sharpen a branch into a weapon. She watched carefully, trying to learn. Her hands trembled at first. But with every small success, striking sparks, holding fire, chewing food without fear, it felt like chains breaking inside her. At night, she had nightmares. She woke screaming, sweating, convinced she was still underground. The human never scolded her. He sat nearby, calm, his voice low. "You are not there anymore. Look around you. You are free." Slowly, his words sank in. She began to believe them. The nightmares came less often. One evening, as the fire crackled, she told him something she had never told anyone. "When I was young, before the chains, I dreamed of the sky. I thought maybe it was only a story. I tried to forget it, but I could not." He nodded, eyes reflecting the flames. "And now you see it. Dreams are not lies. They are promises waiting." Her chest ached. She wanted to believe him fully, but doubt still lingered. She asked quietly, "What if they come again?" "What if it's hardened?" His gaze hardened. "Then we fight. Together." The word "together" echoed in her ears. No one had ever said it to her. She had always been alone, even among other slaves. Now she was not. It frightened her, but it also gave her strength. The forest path grew harder as days passed. Once, they heard the distant howl of the overseer's hounds. The girl froze in terror, her body shaking, memories of whips flooding back. But the human grabbed her hand firmly. "Run with me." They ran through trees, leaping over roots, their breaths ragged. The sound faded behind them, and they collapsed by a stream, gasping for air. She lay against the ground, shaking, but alive. He pulled her up, steadying her, his voice calm despite his exhaustion. "See? You can outrun them. You are stronger than you know." Her eyes burned with tears, but they were not only of fear. Something inside her was shifting. The mine had taught her to see herself as nothing. But here in the forest, with him beside her, she was beginning to see something else. She was beginning to see herself as alive, as someone who could choose, someone who could fight. The girl touched her chest, feeling her heartbeat. For the first time in her life, she did not fear its rhythm ending tomorrow. She wanted it to keep going. She wanted to live. And though danger still hunted them, she whispered to herself in the quiet of night, "I will never go back." The chase ended in fire and steel. They had been free for days, moving through the forest, learning how to survive. But the overseers did not stop. Their soldiers tracked every broken branch, every footprint in the dirt. And one night, under a blood-red sunset, the girl and the human found themselves surrounded. Lanterns glowed between the trees, shadows of guards closing in with whips and blades. The girl froze, terror gripping her like iron chains. Her breath came fast, her hands shook. She saw the mine again in her mind. The tunnels, the darkness, the endless screams. "They will take us back," she whispered, her voice breaking. The human stood in front of her. His body was tired, his face scarred from the journey, but his eyes burned steady. He raised a broken branch, sharpened into a weapon. "They will not take you," he said firmly. The guards laughed when they saw him standing against them. "One man," one shouted, "against us all? You will die here." They rushed forward. The human did not move back. He charged. The fight was brutal. His branch cracked against helmets, broke bones, knocked men to the ground. He moved with fury, every strike echoing years of anger against cruelty. But the soldiers were many. Blades cut across his arm, a whip tore his back, yet he did not stop. He fought like a storm, every blow saying, "You will not chain us again." The girl stood frozen at first, but then something inside her broke loose. She saw the human bleeding, standing for her, refusing to surrender. Her heart thundered. Fear still lived in her body, but alongside it rose a fire stronger than she had ever felt. She grabbed a fallen soldier's knife with trembling hands. When another overseer lunged for the human, she struck. The blade slid into the man's side, and he fell screaming. Her whole body shook with shock, but she did not drop the knife. Her breath came in sharp bursts, her eyes wild. She realized she was not helpless. She could fight. The human glanced at her, blood dripping down his face. For a second, their eyes met, and something wordless passed between them. He gave a small nod, then turned back to the battle. Together, they fought back to back. His strength was raw, unstoppable. Her strikes were desperate but fierce. The guards began to falter. One soldier shouted for retreat, another cursed and fled into the trees. The remaining men backed away, dragging their wounded with them. The forest grew quiet, except for the crackle of fire from a fallen lantern and the ragged sound of two people breathing. The girl dropped the knife, her hands still trembling. She looked at the ground, covered with blood and broken weapons. Her body shook, but not from fear alone. She felt alive, more alive than she ever had in the mines. She looked at her hands, the same hands that had once only carried rocks, now stained with proof that she had defended herself. The human sank to the ground, exhausted, his chest rising and falling heavily. She crawled to him, her eyes filled with worry. "You are hurt," she whispered. He gave a weak smile. "I have been hurt before. This is nothing." Tears blurred her eyes. "They almost took us back." His hand found hers, gripping tightly. "But they didn't, and they won't, not while we stand together." The girl stared at him, her heart heavy with emotion she could not name. She remembered his words in the tunnels. "I am not here to break rocks. I am here to break chains." And she realized now that the chains he had broken were not only on her wrists, but inside her soul. She looked up at the sky. The stars shone bright above the trees. For the first time, she whispered, "I am free." The words felt strange, heavy, but powerful. She said them again, louder, "I am free." The human squeezed her hand. "Yes, and no one can take that from you now." She leaned against him, her body tired, but her spirit burning. In that moment, she understood the truth. She was no longer a slave, not to the mines, not to fear. The girl who had once been broken in the dark had risen into the light. The fire from the broken lantern flickered nearby, and its glow reflected in her eyes. She knew the overseers would come again. She knew the world outside the mines would hold new dangers, new battles. But she was no longer the same girl who had once crawled in silence, waiting to die. She had fought, she had spoken, she had chosen, and she would keep choosing. The human shifted beside her, his voice rough but steady. "Your past does not define you. Now you choose your own life." The girl closed her eyes, resting her head against his shoulder. For the first time in years, she did not feel afraid of tomorrow. She felt ready. The stars above seemed to whisper promises of a future she had never dared to imagine. Together they sat in the forest, bloodied but unbroken. And though the world around them still carried shadows, she knew that as long as he was by her side, she would never return to the darkness. Her heart whispered what her lips could not yet say. He had not only freed her body, he had freed her spirit. And that was something no chain, no guard, no overseer could ever take away again.